Well, I want to introduce everybody to myself. I'm Dan Rodden, and I'm a retired missionary and zookeeper and journalist and newspaper owner and traveler of the world, and now an old man. And with me today is my old friend that I met as I traveled and did all those adventures on the radio. Right, Dave?
Yeah, that was what, about 100 years ago? I heard
That
you on
was
the radio in
That
Grand
was
Rapids,
back
Michigan.
before the internet existed. Can you
That's right.
believe you could meet anybody before the internet existed?
And I heard you taking on the host. You asked him some questions that he couldn't answer. And you were doing what was the name of the conference you were pushing?
Christian
Up
in
in
the
Grand
public
Rapids.
school. We were actually doing the same thing now the Christians are doing in the whole society. Because one of our
Yeah.
principles back then that we tried to teach people, this was in the 70s, I believe we met. Was it the 70s?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was somewhere in the late 70s,
The
probably.
late 70s, in somewhere in there. And our principle was, if we don't retake education is the generating station of values of our culture, the government will take us over. And now here it is. It's like, and everything. I just heard one of our staff that is doing this in Colorado, Bill Jack, is doing Zooms, and he's doing Christian in the public school. And I just went and heard one of them, and all it is what we used to do, teaching people, if they'll do it now, they won't have to do it later. But they
Yeah,
didn't do it.
the whole idea of, I like what David Horowitz says. He says it wasn't Christianity that made our founding fathers great. It was Protestant Christianity,
Yeah.
because they taught equality.
Yeah.
They taught inalienable rights. They taught inclusionism. What's the word?
Inclusionism, and then letting everybody into the culture.
Yeah.
Well,
Tolerance,
see, I think he misses a point on that, and I agree with him total. I think his book is one of the best there is. But see,
Dark Agenda. That's the one you
Dark
referred
Agenda,
to?
yeah, that's a fabulous. We'll have to review that one day on our podcast here, or what do we call this? A Zoomcast?
2 Men in a Bible, Zoomers.
We're Zoomers.
I don't know. Call it whatever you
I
want.
like Zoomers. Oh, that's kind of like we're Boomer Zoomers.
Yeah. We're baby boomers that have become Zoomers.
Boomer Zoomers. There we go. Anyway, the idea I've been thinking about, see, we get attacked because we want, and when I went on Phil Donahue, this is like when I met you, I was traveling and all over the country and doing every little radio show and doing TV and everything I could get on, because the liberals owned all the media. And I had to go on Oprah and Phil Donahue and Mort Downey Jr. and every little interview. And that's how I met you. We became good friends. You invited me to have coffee, and then I came over to your house and stayed the night. And then we just kept interacting more and more and more. But on Phil Donahue, I saw that he was trying to make everything values oriented, which is secular. And I tried to talk to the Christians. I said, values isn't Christian. It isn't what Christians are talking about. We're talking about morality, which goes to the infinite, all-knowing God. It's a different system than a value system is only about you and what you value. And there's nothing wrong with values. Values are good as long as they're based on morality. And I used that argument on Phil Donahue, and he got so mad and tried to cut me off.
I wish you had a video of that. You still have that?
I have all those videos hidden somewhere in my RV. I can't find them. I have looked.
Well, you gotta do a spring cleaning, because that would be. I remember those days. About 10 years before that, Time Magazine had an article as "God Dead" or "God is Dead." Yeah. Nietzsche, and then Ravi Zacharias was starting up. That was 50 years ago. And then, of course, in 2017, which is only a few years ago, Time Magazine, "Is Truth Dead?" So you were starting this whole idea that we have got to stand up in culture, and we've got to speak up, and we've got to refuse to shut up.
Well, it's a little
And
deeper than
that's what
that.
you
We
put.
had to show up and not shut up. That was our phrase.
Yeah, back then that's good.
Yeah. So anyway, the idea, we started talking about this picture, Dave. See, this is why this is so good for 2 Men in a Bible, and actually why my wife said we should do this. Because she hears us on the phone, and she says, you know, you guys talk about some of the most interesting things. You just go off and on and on, and that's what this show is about. That's what this podcast is about. Two old guys. Here, maybe. Oh, I got to go out and get this other picture because I have this other picture.
Well, there's two guys.
Two old
there you go.
Two old guys that have been around for a long time, and we fought the battles together. And we
You have a bigger belly. You have a bigger belly than I do on that shot.
Yeah, we you noticed that. And we learned that we're to look at everything through the lens of the Bible. And in doing that, we point people to Jesus and we make disciples.
Now, it's interesting on this shot right here. You have two guys at the top.
Yes.
And they're instructing two guys.
Yes.
And those two guys are trying to help the guys after them. So 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. 2.
2. That's it. Now, teach faithful men who will in turn teach others also. I thought these 5 pictures, I think I showed 5 or 6, encapsulated kind of what we're trying to do on 2 Men in a Bible. Would you say so?
Yeah, I think I put it in a general way and a specific way.
Okay. Give me the general and specific of it.
Yeah, the general, when Christ went up to heaven, Acts chapter 1, before you get to Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 1, there's a tremendous system. You know how I love systems.
And I wouldn't think you loved a system. Mr. Spreadsheet himself.
So the system in Acts chapter 1 is they list the 12, but actually they only had 11. So that messes the whole system up. That's not an even number.
Yeah.
So they start with Peter and John, and then they list two more. They have 5 sets of 2, and they get to the last guy, and that was Judas, the son of James, and then he's all by himself because Judas is dead. Judas Iscariot is dead.
Yeah.
So Acts chapter 1 is all about them selecting Matthias. And then,
but you never hear about him again.
Well, I looked him up on, Wikipedia. There's some interesting theories, but I won't get into that now. But of where he went and what he did.
I know he did. He did still was a Christian and did good things. But see, I think what's important is God had another guy in mind, and that was Paul.
Right.
And that's why I think he is one of the 12 apostles now. So anyway, go ahead. That's my theory.
Well, when they elected him, they said we have to find guys that have been with Jesus from the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I never saw that before because these were people that saw him probably at his baptism.
Spent a lot of time
all the way through, and so it wasn't just the 12 eyewitnesses, which we call apostles,
right?
But there was a whole group of people, and they wanted to select among that group that had been with him from the beginning. So they had a guy named Joseph called Justus. They rejected him, and they accepted Matthias. And you're right. Later on, the book of Acts is really the Acts of the Apostles.
Right.
That's where you get Paul.
And that's why the progression of the book of Acts, I think, is so important because it shows that Paul actually in his writings points out that he for 3.5 years he went up into Asia and Jesus taught him. That he learned from the scriptures and personal revelation. I think he was with Jesus in a different way for his specific purpose, which Paul became the highlight of the New Testament, you could say.
Yeah, there was, so in a general way, right, Jesus sent out people 2 by 2.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So even
if Paul continued that because he took on Timothy and Barnabas took on Paul.
Titus.
Yeah, and that 2 by 2 thing is all in the New Testament. Yes.
Well, in the Old Testament, if one falls down, the other can pick
That's right.
him up.
Moses
And
didn't think he could do it, so God gave him Aaron.
yeah.
And
So
yeah,
in a very general way, talking about a general purpose of two men in a Bible, it's the thing. I got the idea from Two Men in a Truck, and
really?
You always need two guys.
I thought you thought this up.
I did. I thought
all
it up
this time. You got it from a truck.
I got it from two men picking up furniture and putting stuff in a truck. Now, Two Men in a Bible is very, very similar.
Yes,
it's two guys trying to help people in a general way. If you start at birth, we can tell people about how we're formed in the womb.
Yes.
We talk about pro-life. As children get older, we talk about the principles of parenting.
Right.
And then, of course, you get into teenagehood. And then you get into all the different, there isn't a subject that the Bible doesn't touch.
And that's why I think this concept that you came up with on 2 Men in a Bible is such a great idea, particularly for this time. I mean, it always has been, but particularly for old guys like us. And, we can't go as much as we used to. I can't. I'm doing better right now, but I've had times where I could barely move. I've had diseases that have constantly hurt me, and you fight it. And like I'm wearing my I'm wearing my protection today. Did you notice?
There you go.
I'm keeping the virus from you getting me here. See, if I have my virus thing on.
See, what has happened is pictures, movies, television has become real to you. See, that's your
right.
reality.
Oh, absolutely. I that isn't new though, because remember when we used to do our seminars there in Chicago, and you'd bring your youth group, and we had youth groups coming from Alaska and all over the world, the United States at least. No, the world. We had other countries represented too, and we always had a TV time at night. Remember?
Yep. Or movie time. Yeah.
At movie time, yeah. And that was, some of the people were really struggling with that, because at that time, Christian people were not supposed to go to the movies. I mean, fundamentalists particularly. And we were considered fundamentalist, and I can still consider myself a fundamentalist. And that's the problem. I still do. And the emergent church has gone on to whatever they feel like.
Well, and the fundamentalist, of course, was a set of papers, and all they were is doctrinal statements.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that consider themselves evangelicals, they don't realize that all it was is a doctrinal statement. Today, people don't care about doctrinal statements.
No, they don't care about those ideas. No.
So
they just care about, where do you go to church? What box can I put you in?
So we've taken Disciples University, because people don't know what the word university is, and we start with 7 essential doctrines. These are the 7 doctrines that are totally essential. Now, where do you hear that word today? Only essential services, right?
Yep. Now, here's what's interesting. Can you see that picture I just put up?
I can't. That's the original Harvard Shield.
That's right. And that's where a lot of the modeling, it's Veritas, truth. Remember, the Veritas is truth. And we worked on that quite a lot together, talking about it as you were developing this concept of Disciples University, because you had some people giving you a hard time. Remember? Well, you can't use the word university. Remember how that was happening?
Right. They think they own it. And I said, well, I would ask those people, can you give me the etymology of the word university? And then it got real interesting. It got real interesting because they couldn't do it.
No.
I talked to a guy in a bookstore at Harvard University, first and only time I've been there. And I said, do you teach here? He said, yes. He said, what gave it away? I said, well, you just kind of look like a professor. Could you tell me the etymology of the word university? And he started saying, well, it's a group of schools and everybody knows what it is. I said, how about universals in all the diverse subjects? And he says, well, yeah, that probably is an accurate description.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
So
I'll take
on
that.
this
And see,
shield,
that's foundational to what they're doing. Now, today, we just have colleges. They're called universities. And that's one of the things we began to see is because there's no universals, they just have this school of history, school of philosophy, school of this, school of that. And they don't have anything to bring them together. Like Harvard originally did, they had the chapel and they had the Bible and they had Christ. What's that word? I can't read it.
I think it's Christ and the church.
Yeah, ecclesia, I think is what it says.
That's ecclesia. That's the church. That's
yeah.
ecclesia.
And see what you have, that's a ribbon running through truth. And if you notice, the ribbon runs up into that V and runs through, and it's like that's the Holy Spirit working through. So you have the Bible and the Holy Spirit, but they said it in real intelligent ways, in words that we aren't used to using. Like what was that word you used? I have a hard time with that one too. The etymology. And I had to think. See, I work with normal people. I don't work with people that use those kind of words. No.
Well, Aristotle said there's 3 words that make up the 3 areas of knowledge: the metaphysical world, the invisible world. Epistemology is how do you know truth, or how do you know the metaphysical? And then the word that flows out of it is axiology. So we don't say those big words. We say real, true, value.
Yep.
So a worldview is what you assume to be real, what you assume to be true, and what you assume to be valuable. Real, true, value. Yep. But what, Dan, I didn't want to forget here, I never really saw this, but the ribbons there, Christ and his church, they come to a V.
Yep.
And down below, Veritas, T-A-S, TAS, that's the Bible that is illuminating the other areas of knowledge.
That's right. Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's why I look at this logo and see, they've changed this logo now. I wish I had the others here. Because as we were studying this, I remember looking at all the logos all through history. And they have secularized this logo, just like we say secularism is a religion. They changed religions, as Harvard did in 1805, from biblical fundamental thinking to Unitarian thinking. And then by 1920, they changed totally to secular. So,
well, and then in the mid 80s, what Ravi Zacharias did is he went to Harvard and Ohio State, and he gave the same lecture. And the lecture was entitled, "Can Man Live Without God?" Well, Chuck Colson came to him and said, "You got to put this in a book." So over 25 years ago, Ravi wrote a book, "Can Man Live Without God?" And that became the basis of the definition of the word secularism. Secularism is the religious notion that you can live your life without God. Yeah. So I got the whole thing right from Ravi Zacharias. Right. Now today, he wrote a book, The Logic of God. And he shows that only Christianity answers the 4 great questions of life.
It can only stay on reason and faith. We have both, because we put faith in the Word of God, in God. I have a little slide on that. Let me see if I can find that one. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, while you're looking.
Here we go. Biblicists live in the light of the Bible and walk in the flow of the Spirit. Would that be? Good. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what that symbol of, that's what they were doing at Harvard at one time. And then they secularized. Right.
Well, that's good, because in the flow of God's Spirit, and the word, instead of using some denominational word like Episcopalian or Presbyterian, right, Methodist or Baptist, you and I, for how long? We've used the word biblicist. Yes. And that kind of was what Francis Schaeffer did too. That's exactly right.
He called himself fundamentalist, though. Yeah. And the reason is, he explained just what you said. It was a set of doctrines that da-da-da. But here's John Adams at that time. He says, I have examined all religions, and the result is that the Bible is the best book in the world. That is amazing.
Back there, that is a great quote. And I remember one of the most difficult things that I watched you do, and I've tried to do for decades now, is to try to get people to understand that everyone is equally religious. That
That's right.
secularism,
That's
atheism, is the ABCs, the attitudes, and beliefs, and concepts. And people don't want to, they want to see Dan Rodden as religious.
Oh yeah, they put me in a box, man. They want to put you in a box. I remember you telling, you should tell some of the stories about what happened to you at work, the persecution you got.
But how do you get people to understand that they're just as religious as you are? See, he said, I've examined all religions. But John Adams back then, he didn't ever talk about secularism because that was something.
Well, it wasn't existing yet because he came into existence in 1849, which was actually about the time of Darwin. See, Darwinism and secularism came together, and Holyoake's idea was to draw in the liberal-minded Christians to oppose Christianity. It wasn't get them to be atheists, just to help them to oppose Christianity. And I think that's exactly.
Say that guy's name again and describe, when you go to Wikipedia, he's called the father of secularism.
Father of secularism. Now, there's always been, and this is where there's confusion on this, because secularists don't even agree on this, but there's always been kind of secular people in the church. The Catholic Church actually before that set up priests and then what they call secular priests. But it wasn't secularism. They didn't take God out. They still had God in. Secularism is atheism is just atheism. And it just gets you to... Go ahead.
I was trying to get you to... You went real fast over the father of secularism.
Oh, Holyoake.
Why did you call George Jacob Holyoake? Why was he the father of secularism?
Because he was. That's what they say. The historians say he's the father. But as you go read his writings, and I studied him, I spent a lot. Actually, I wrote a book. I wish I had that here. We need to offer that book as a giveaway when we do this, because that book goes through the history of George Jacob Holyoake and shows how at the time of John Adams, see, they were following John Locke, the philosopher John Locke. John Locke, although he had secular tendencies at times, he was trying, no, that's not true. He was trying to find natural explanations of how the world worked. And see, this is a very important distinction at that time in history, what they call the Enlightenment period, which really was the Endarkening period. But the Enlightenment period was a period where a lot of people were trying to take economics, to take history, to take politics, and make it into a science. So there were laws, and actually, Isaac Newton was one of the people who did that. He says, but he also, see, Isaac Newton was not a secularist. He says, we account the scriptures to be the most sublime philosophy, to find more sure marks of authenticity in the Bible than in any profane history whatever. So he saw the Bible, and he actually had another one. I thought that was a quote I was going to put up, but I forgot. I didn't save it here. Is he said, atheism is so senseless. As you look at the sun at the right distance from the moon and stars, this did not happen by chance.
So did he see things as faith-based or fact-based?
See, this is why these guys didn't divide that way. This is hard for us I think one of the hardest things, it's even harder in understanding secularism. They saw the world as God-based. I mean, that's the best way to say it. And then they started with God, and they just made that assumption, and then they worked down from there. We're starting with secularism and trying to find God. And and it's hard to do out of just pure reason if you don't accept history as evidence. And that's where I think Horowitz is so important. And who's that other younger guy that's Jewish? I just blanking on his name.
Ben Shapiro?
Ben Shapiro, yeah. I think he brings this out the most in his debates with Peterson. It's Peterson, I believe, that he debates.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson, yeah. He debate, and then also Dennis Prager. I've learned this by watching these Jewish guys. See, they see reality as historical evidence. They always start with historical evidence. And they do because they exist because of historical evidence. It's in the Ten Commandments. If you go through the Ten Commandments series that, oh shoot, what's his name again? You just said his name.
Dennis Prager.
Dennis Prager did that great series on the Ten Commandments. And it really helped me because he says, Christians start the Ten Commandments with God, but what happens, the Ten Commandments itself starts with the God who brought you out of slavery. They starts with the slavery issue, and I'm showing you who I am. And he goes through the plagues, and he says there's evidence in history. So they have a historical argument. But what's interesting, and you see this even with Fauci today with this issue that we're dealing with the pandemic, and you see this with the evolution, they only accept scientific evidence. And Fauci even made a statement about this. Well, that's just some historical data. It isn't science. He made that statement.
Right.
And that confirms this idea. See, they're secular, and a secularist is closed-minded because he excludes God from his thinking. He's religious because he believes in putting a box around the mind. And he's a bigot because he persecutes those who will not just let science be the truth. And they have made science the truth, and they don't accept any other evidence. But Jesus always called for 2 witnesses. And Jesus there was evidence throughout nature, but he came and he showed people personally. And it was like this is why we do 2 men in a Bible. I think it comes back to the idea. He came and personally talked to people, personally made two men in a Bible. He set them out in twos, and they taught them how to how would I say this? Taught them how to find faithful men and teach them to teach others. This multiplication process that discipleship is. So anyway, you got me on a roll, and now I forgot where I went.
Well, the thing is, the word not only faithful men, but to entrust to faithful men.
Yeah,
and
to entrust.
And
that's where you and I are now. We're older, so we're doing a lot more.
You keep saying that, but we're not as old as Noah.
Yeah, but we're as older than George Washington.
But when you bring up Isaac Newton,
you see this scarf? Okay, you want to know why I wear this scarf? It's because of George Washington.
That's not why your wife says you wear it.
Why did she say?
I'm not going to go into it.
Oh, okay. You're terrible because you get to talk to my wife, and I can hide her from most other people.
All right. So Isaac Newton, right, one of the greatest scientists of all time, he had this idea that he understood what Paul did. When Paul went to the Jews, he didn't start with creation. He started with resurrection. When he went to the Greeks, he didn't start with the resurrection. He started with the creation.
Yeah.
So it depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And that's why.
You're asking me the question, and that's where I don't want to lose this because we need to talk about it more today or other times too, is faith and reason, because those are 2 issues that Christians have a lot of conflict with, and I don't want to get away from that. But go ahead and finish what you were saying.
No, the only other thought there was that today, you and I in our lifetime, we always appeal to archaeology or to Bible prophecy or to the Bible as history. But today, there are a lot of people in the area of science.
Oh, absolutely.
And one time we got to spend a session on replacing Darwin, because what that does is it shows that genetics has replaced
Yes.
the faith-based notion of Charles Darwin.
To me, right now, and as an old guy, and I can honestly say I'm an old guy, and the reason I scarf, I was going to tell you the story of the scarf. The reason my scarf represents the coronavirus, okay? And everybody always tries to tell me, well, you're not old. Well, I'm 73 years old, okay? George Washington died when he was 67. He was a strong guy. He went out riding on his horse one day. It rained, and he came home, and they said, oh, he got a chill from the rain. No, he didn't. There was a flu epidemic, and he got it, and it killed him. That's what we know now, okay? Well, the whole thing is, I'm similar. I know my immune system is not as good as it used to be, so I'm wearing my scarf. I'm not running around on airplanes like I used to, and I don't have to. We have this thing. Isn't this amazing?
Well, I'm so tired about hearing about the China virus that I've almost said, hey, just take me. I would rather be in heaven than to hear people talk on the news endlessly.
Endlessly. It is endless. That's all they talk about. And then the advertising. Have you seen the ads that come up? We're all one now. We're together. It's like the new gospel. It's the new socialist gospel.
I try to turn on water and electric for our business that flips houses.
Yes.
And I have to listen to this big, long spiel about the coronavirus from every one of these utility companies. And I'm telling you, they're going to kill me. The ads are...
Well, here's the key, though. This is why we call it 2 Men in a Bible. And I think we should, I don't know, what time is it getting to be? What time did you say you have to go?
I'm okay. I got about 25 minutes.
Oh, we're good then. This will help. I just want to pull this back a little bit together. The purpose of our podcast or our broadcast or our Zoomcast, or what is it? A Boomer Zoomer cast here is Biblisters are more than conquerors. We're overcomers. And that is really true. Jesus said, and what overcomes? Our faith, it says in the book of Revelation. So that's where, although I was really sick for the last year, I have had a real bad case of a muscle kind of arthritis that totally kept me in a chair. And now I got cancer, but I'm overcoming. I've even found ways to get rid of the cancer. It's amazing.
Boomers have become Zoomers. Baby boomers have become
that we've overcome because God gave us away. But now we have an opportunity. I said, Lord, I can't die. This is the greatest opportunity I've ever had to share all this evidence.
Yeah. Well, you see, faith, you're talking about faith is the way we overcome, but it has to be faith that's rooted in reality. Rooted in fact.
That's true.
And what I am so excited about is all these guys that are showing you in mathematics that there is an invisible hand, or they show you that in genetics there's a time stamp in the genetic code in the DNA. And so what is happening is God is saying, you want evidence? And now in our lifetime, we've lived long enough to watch the creationist movement evolve into a fact-based, science-based apologetic.
But it's still faith. It is science. It's not one and the other. They're giving you the evidence of why you should put your faith in the Bible. And that's really the key. Now
it's logical, and Ravi
it's logical. God created reason. That's right.
Yeah, and so he says there's 4 questions and 4 answers, and they're coherent and they correspond. We'll have to do a whole session on the logic of God by Ravi Zacharias. It's excellent.
We got to do a whole session on lots of things, but this is just kind of rambling to kind of get our feet wet.
Here's the thing. I was talking about 2 men in the Bible in general terms as opposed to specific terms. In general terms, if you get two guys that know the Bible, they can address any teenage problem, any parenting problem, any business problem, any foreclosure problem. There isn't a subject that two men in a Bible, regardless of their age,
that's right.
If they know the scriptures, they can address all the issues of life.
Well,
dating, engagement, marriage, parenting, finances, economics.
That's why studying the Bible is so important. Yeah.
Specifically, I'll get to it. Whenever you feel like me talking about the specifics of why we need two men in the Bible.
Well, go ahead. We got 20 minutes.
Well, specifically, what?
But I'll probably disrupt you.
Oh, that's normal.
I know.
Specifically, 20 years ago, I started asking church leaders. I would always preface it and say, Jesus said, go out and make disciples. How many people go to your church? Well, I've got 100. Another guy may say, well, I've got 10,000. I said, great. How many people have a plan to make disciples? And they would start maybe at 20%. And I'd say, let's get them together. If you got 10,000 people, 20% of 10,000, let's get them together. I want to talk to them. I want to talk to them about their plan. Well, it probably isn't 20. It might be 10. Well, and bottom line, they'd work their way all the way down to 1%. I said, great. 1% of 10,000 people is...
And literally, Dave, I can testify that I saw you doing that.
I mean, so what is specifically two men in a Bible, there's a difference between a strategy and a tactic. And two men in the Bible is a tactical maneuver that Christ gave us to help the other tactics. And what specifically we're aimed at is we're trying to go after the secular school and find the students, the teachers, and the parents that are Christian, but they need encouragement and they need tools and they need good links to good information, and just help them in that. As you said way back, I think it was the 80s, you had a conference called Living in a War Zone Reality. And so
I have a t-shirt on right now, Dave, that says I live in a war zone reality.
See, you haven't changed.
No, it's the same.
You're a fundamentalist.
I fight the world, the flesh. No, I'm old, and I know I'm fighting the world, the flesh, and the devil. It becomes more obvious as you get older. But go ahead. I don't want you to get off your tactic here.
Well, so in other words, generally, two men in the Bible can approach and help people with any subject known to man, because the Bible is
gives you wisdom. It gives you wisdom.
And principles and wisdom.
Yes.
But specifically, what I'm trying to do is build an army that will focus on a target, and we call the target secularism, but the bullseye of the target is the secular school.
Well, let me just come in here a little bit. And I agree with that totally. That's the generating station of the values in our culture. But we gotta, I think in our culture for you right now, where people are feeling this, secular schools are closed.
Right.
Why?
Right.
They've gone back to the dark ages. They don't even have a way to teach people anymore. Well, what are they doing? They're going to what you and I chose to do back, 130 years ago, homeschool. Yeah. But they don't want to call it homeschool. They call it distance learning.
Right.
I just find the Semitic mysticism is so amazing. They come up with words because they don't want to have to use our words. But the internet is what they're trying to utilize to keep secularizing kids.
Well, there's no stopping it. There's no stopping it.
What we're fighting now is the whole culture. It's a culture war. It's much bigger than just the school. So I think what you're targeting is much bigger than what you think you are. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I have an idea for a 17-year-old boy that really likes girls. Now, do you know any 17-year-old boys that don't like girls? Very few.
I met one the other day that was transgendering. Yeah.
All they have to do, if we give them a strategy, they can set up a Zoom session.
Yeah.
For girls, right? And they can get all these girls coming and saying, look, I'm trying to figure out life. I'm 17 and I believe the Bible, and I want to talk to you about what I want in a girl. I mean, they could have so much fun with this.
Wow.
And they could integrate biblical principles.
You're crazy, Dave. You're crazy.
Well, what I'm saying, I mean,
that's genius.
Zoom session, I could see you at 17 doing that.
That's genius. Yeah, it's genius.
Or a girl could start a Zoom session, and it could just be for boys. This is what I'm looking for in a boy. He's got to be funny. He's got to be good looking. He's got to be smart. And most important, he has to have a sense of humor. You know, they can have so much fun with this. And you know what? They're doing it. We don't have to tell them to do it. They are so creative because they're, you know, the Zoom sessions and other things like them can be so effective. And I really think it's going to take over the bricks and mortars. I really do.
Oh, I do too. I call them Christian infopreneurs. I even have a webpage about that. And you and I have talked about that over the months or years that we've been working, piddling around on the internet. Because as I got older and quit traveling, I began to see, well, shoot, this internet superhighway does it all. Actually, I created about 5 years ago a page called Virtual Vacations, because I said, hey, you can go to everywhere without leaving your house. And so I created all these virtual vacations where people would go to, actually what it was, no, my wife went on a vacation with my son. That's how it worked. They went on to, this is interesting how this developed. He went on to a vacation with my son, and they went to Jamestown. And I'd never been there, so I thought, I'd like to see Jamestown. So I went online, and I started kind of walking through the places they were. They weren't videoing it. Now they could do that. But there were videos on Jamestown from the places they were doing it, and I got a better tour than they did. Yeah. So I posted this. Well, now I see the government is doing, and I don't know who's doing it. I'm sure private sector is too, virtual vacations, because they can't go to these state parks. They've been closed. So they created virtual. Well, I've had a webpage like that for 5 years.
Yeah. So it's
and that's where creativity is the greatest resource, and that's what you're saying.
Well, it's so interesting that, you know, we're creationists because we know that we were created by a creator.
Yeah.
But even people that don't acknowledge a creator are also creationists, because God has planted in their heart and mind to be fruitful and to be creative. And some of the most brilliant people, some of the things they're coming up with. And that's why I know we're in the hole financially, but I really believe that because people are creative and entrepreneurs, there's going to be an explosion of knowledge, just like the Bible predicted.
Well, it is happening. Yeah, there's no question, and we're seeing that. We see that as you and I went to the Ark together.
Yeah,
I see after going there what they're doing. They built the Ark and they built the Creation Museum, and those are important. You know, we both believed that for years, and we encouraged and we tried to do that, but we couldn't do it. I couldn't afford it. But what Ken Ham has done there is so amazing, and a lot of other Christians work with him. But what is I think the most valuable tool they have is that stage. They have developed that now. And what it was designed originally for was people that came there would sit and they'd give them lectures. But those are on the internet, on YouTube, every time they give one.
Right.
And that that wasn't available when I met you, Dave. I had to go and get on Oprah and Phil Donahue, and they were attacking me, and I was at disadvantage all the time.
Right.
Ken Ham
and Ray Comfort, two men in the Bible.
Yeah.
Ken Ham could say, he can get up there and he can talk about this or that, and he'd say, okay, Ray, I'd like you to talk about the resurrection. So you're right. That's the powerful thing that we need to be taking advantage of.
Yeah, and that's why I think this 2 Men in a Bible concept, and I hope that others will pick it up, because we're not the best at it. We ramble, we're old. We do a pretty good job, but I think it's an important principle that's built into the internet. It just works for the internet.
Well, Dan, it's Acts chapter 1.
How's that?
there's that system. There's 6 sets of 2 men, starting with Peter and John. That's a set. And, Matthew and Bartholomew, that's a set. The 2 men in the Bible comes from Acts chapter 1, and that's before the day of Pentecost.
Yeah. Well, it comes even with Moses and Aaron and.
Sure.
Yeah. All the way back.
It's a powerful, simple.
Well, it even comes with Adam and Eve. There were 2 men in the generic sense of the word. Adam saw that he was alone. He was created alone, but he reasoned out as he named the animals, oh, I'm alone. I don't have the ability to be fruitful without something. He would
have been extremely disappointed if God had created another man.
That's true, and he didn't. It was better than that. That's why he said, oh, wow.
Well, that's what the famous picture of Michelangelo, where he has God touching Adam with his finger.
Yes. Yeah.
And what he has in the other hand is Eve. And he's basically saying, this is what Adam is saying, wow, thank you for that gift. God gave Eve to man, to Adam.
That's right. Yeah. And see, there we all, and a family is 2 at least, and then it multiplies. And that's where I think this picture here is so good, because you have the 2 guys at the top that have already gotten through the rocks, and then they kind of telling the 2 guys that are pulling up the rocks how to do it, and the 2 guys that are pulling up the rocks are reaching down and pulling up others. So that's faithful men. That's why I like this picture for describing 2 Timothy 2:2. And you saw it right off the bat when you first saw it.
Yeah, that is something I'm going to have to incorporate, because generally any 2 men that know the Bible, or any 2 women that know the Bible.
And let me put it this way: when we say men, we're talking about the general mankind. Okay.
Right. So
most of the time.
But specifically, if 2 men in a Bible can work with, we won't go into it today, but I've got 7 tactical groups that all work together to impact a secular school. But it starts with 2 men in a Bible, because they can work with all these different groups. I don't want to mention them all today.
Okay. But we don't have time today.
That is the specific purpose. And what happens is we get so overwhelmed by living in a secular culture. As Francis Schaeffer said,
right.
The problem with the West is they see things in bits and pieces. They didn't have a university mindset anymore.
Right.
And that's so we're all fragmented.
That's exactly why I think when you came up with this idea of Disciples University, you were attacked on that idea that you saw from Harvard. And that is such a critical thing, because truth is the basis and the Holy Spirit. And that's why when Jesus said we worship in spirit and in truth. So both of those are always consistent.
Let me ask you a question, okay?
Yeah.
Who was the great founding father who came up with the phrase, I give you a university if you can keep it?
Actually, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, but he says, I give you a republic, wasn't it?
I know it. That was the joke.
Oh, I get you. Okay. Sorry. It's a joke. I'm laughing.
Well, Harvard,
I'm an old guy. I don't get all the jokes.
Yeah, John Harvard understood what he was doing as an educator.
Yeah.
I was a preacher. Was it for like 150 years he had to be an ordained minister to teach at Harvard? I mean, their worldview and their concept of university was so well thought through.
Yeah. But here's what's key. That university was founded only 17 years after the Pilgrims landed at Jamestown.
So they had the worldview, and they just naturally did what
they created a government. They created, a farming system, a trade system, all that within 17 years. because they weren't hindered by the secularism and the bureaucracy of England. That was why we had such a window of opportunity, that when the Pilgrims arrived and the new immigrants arrived here for the next 200 years, we've had amazing opportunity to apply biblical thought. The secularists put a monkey wrench in the system, but I think we've got the advantage, and that's why
nothing's changed. My sister in Michigan is rebelling against the king. Well, it's not a king; it's a governor. The governor of Michigan isn't letting guys get in their own.
What a horrible government! He's a DD. What is it? A DD. I have a new phrase for him. A DDP.
You're talking about Attorney General. I'm talking about the governor.
I know they're all Democrat.
Oh.
Let's see. I have a phrase. Let me see if I can get it back. I try to put this in little sentences so I can remember. He's a Democrat. Oh, it's the Democratic Death Party.
Well, it really is,
because that guy wants to kill the babies and the old people.
Now, when are you talking about what guy?
Any Democrat. They want to kill babies. That you can't be in the Democrat Party if you don't kill babies.
Wow.
They're for socialism, they're for abortion, they're for atheism, they're for big government, they're for same-sex marriage, they're anti-gun, they're for higher taxes, illegal immigrants. Anyone can vote, and that's because they want to have Democrats instead of Republicans. And there's a reason to be a Republican, because we're a republic. We have laws we're governed by, not by just a mob. And they're for open borders, and they want Obamacare. These are some of the things of the DDPs. The DDPs, see, and that's where you have Attorney General. See, I think the way you can sum all of these up, these Democrats where all this virus is, where they're wasting all this money, where they're doing all this stuff, they're all DDPs. They're Democrat Death Party. I believe you can say that. And I have a definition that I think is sustainable. And we'll talk about that another time.
Well, the truth of the matter is we've never seen in our lifetime such a clear choice. Whatever the label is.
It's getting clear, isn't it?
Oh, my word. It's just amazing how I like to call them a religion, because a religion is your ABCs, your attitudes, your beliefs, and your concepts. And they have an attitude that's amazing. I mean, this governor in Michigan does not want men to get in their own boat on their own lake and go fishing.
Yeah. I have my mechanic here in the RV park. He just escaped Michigan, and his family's still up there, and they do kind of what your boss does. They buy and sell houses up there, and refurb them. They hate this guy or this woman that's up in Michigan.
Well, the thing is,
they're not Christians, Dave. They just see tyranny.
Right, exactly. It's total tyranny.
Yeah.
And that's why there's guys with guns showing up at the courthouse. Now, Francis Schaeffer wrote a book, The Christian Manifesto, when he says there's a time to oppose the civil government. Well, the thing is, wisdom and asking the right questions, and like if you follow and you try to become more and more like Christ, what you have to understand is that you may suffer, you may die for righteousness.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think what's interesting about those guys, though, before you go on and finish, but don't want to.
No, that's all I want to say.
What's even, I think, more important, and most people missed it in the news, it's not the guys with the guns that are the biggest story. What's the biggest story is the legislators sitting inside that legislator they're so scared they put on a bulletproof vest. They have gotten scared.
Well, they should be scared.
Good. That's why. Wow, you mean the government is scared of the people? Gee, that's why our founding fathers said. That's how the King of England saw the people of the New World.
But you and I are not promoting revolution.
No.
and anarchy, what you're doing, the lens on this camera that you have here, Romans 12, 1 and 2, go through that. What was he begging them, beseeching them? What was Paul begging them to do in Romans 12?
To present their bodies living and holy sacrifice. This was their spiritual service of worship. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of their minds. And that's what this is all about. We're doing.
Yeah, so I don't want to give people the impression that we're, just because the lines have been drawn so clearly in this next election, that what we're promoting is putting yourself up on the altar and be willing to be persecuted, be willing to suffer. It's so amazing when I go through, every day I try to go through one chapter of the Bible, and I just finished up 1 Peter, and the word suffer is used over and over and over again.
That's right.
So we should expect to suffer. I mean, not that we want to suffer, not that we want to, but we live in the world, and so we will suffer persecution.
Well, what I find is very interesting when I look at those pictures and I looked at those news reports with those guys with the guns. I think there were probably only 4 guys with guns, and there was probably quite a few thousand people in Michigan at the
debate.
Right.
And they had permits. They had carry permits.
Well, they were open carrying. That's a little different. I'm not sure what the law is in Michigan, so I can't tell you. But what I saw, they didn't use them. They flashed them.
Right.
And that is what the Second Amendment is about. And the liberals hate the Second Amendment. They hate the First Amendment, and they hate the Second Amendment. Now, what Bill Jack and working in Colorado through the Supreme Court laws, getting rid of the limit test, has given us back the First Amendment. We have, the government is limited. The people are free to have their religion and petition the government for the redress of grievances and assemble. Those are the basic principles of the First Amendment. But the Second Amendment says, and if you won't let us do this, we have the right to bear arms to protect ourselves. And that was the flash that was done there. And that was brilliantly done. I thought it was wonderful. And it is not, we want to shoot people, but if you try to kill my wife, I'll shoot you. The Bible gives us the right to defensive war.
Yeah, and that whole thing.
And that is what our founding fathers believed.
And it came about by the guy just wanted to bake cakes the way he wanted to bake cakes. I mean, he should have the freedom.
In Colorado? Oh, yeah.
To do whatever he wants,
Yeah, that's right. So these are things we're going to, because some of them are hard, and I understand why Christians, they get a bit squeamish when they see people guns, because Christians tend to be a bit non-gunny. But having, some churches are arming people in their church at this time in history because there are crazy things happening, and it's saved lives. Because our purpose is not we're not animus objects, and this is where it's key. The whole anti-gun movement is an animist movement. Now, animist is the object is evil. The objects are not evil. Trees are not evil. People in third world countries think the trees are evil. Well, right. The demon that's in the tree is evil, but the demon persuades them, and tree's the problem. And that's what we're having happen now. It's a form of animism that is persuading people that this object that has a little muzzle on it and has a trigger and all that stuff is evil in itself. And it isn't, because it helps us feed ourselves. It gives us pleasure through target practice. It gives us defense, and those are all good things. And most people don't know, and we'll deal with this more, but the thing that created the freedoms we have is, see, back in the Middle Ages, the barbarians, or what they were called the Vandals, just went through Europe and killed everybody. They would just vandalize because the peasants had no way to protect themselves. They just had pitchforks and rakes. They were working in the farm. And the Vandals trained as mercenaries, and they would just come and conquer.
And the Vandals, and by the way, my time is up, but the Vandals could not shut down your YouTube video. They couldn't do that. We'll have to talk about that. But right now, I got to run up and take care of some business on a Saturday morning.
This has been, have you enjoyed doing this, Dave? I have enjoyed it a lot.
That's what we've been doing for 30 years.
But we haven't been able to record it, and we just did. I'll post it. Bye-bye.
Great. I'll talk to you later.